Hey, good afternoon, guys. Welcome to our first Lunch and Learn session about indirect collection. My name's Caroline Carver and I'm from Three Black Cats. We'll be chatting today about what the new changes, upcoming changes to the Privacy Act mean, and how it applies to your organisations potentially. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. You can be anonymous there if you wish, and we will endeavour to answer them at the end. We will be recording today's session and publishing it on our website. So if you want to share it afterwards or re-watch it, you are more than welcome. Perfect. So let us get started. So first up, what is indirect collection? So the upcoming changes to the Privacy Act are all about indirect collection. But first of all, we need to know what that is and what it means. So indirect collection is about collection of personal information. So before we carry on, we need to just reaffirm what personal information is. So personal information is any information that tells us something about a specific person. We don't need to know their name, but they need to be identifiable in some form. So this could be, for example, a photograph of someone. We can clearly identify who they are as a person, but we can't necessarily know their name. Equally, it might be an email address. We don't know the name of the person it belongs to, although sometimes you can work it out, but we know it's always about that one person. IP address is another common one. It connects your computer to yourself. It's likely to be about you. Okay. So when we think about personal information, we need to think that very broad element to it. And actually, a lot of our indirect collection comes from some of those less tangible parts of personal information where we may not know that person's name. So thinking about indirect collection. So indirect collection means we collect information about a person from someone other than that person. Okay, so we might collect it from another organization. So for example, we might receive the information from police or a credit bureau. We might receive it as a referral from maybe a recruitment agency. We might also get it from somebody else. So it might be someone is telling you about a situation with their partner or their child as part of the services you offer to them. So it's quite broad where it might come from. And it might come in any forms. That might be someone's chatting in person to you at a meeting and they're telling you about somebody else. So we might be having, my one-on-one with my manager, and I'm talking about my situation at home, potentially talking about my husband. Okay. Could be someone who's called us up by phone. They're telling us about the fact that their neighbour crashed their car through their fence and they want to make an insurance claim. They might have emailed us. And also we might have got it from someone else's system. So we might, for example, have a referral system or a portal. Equally, we might have got it transferred from another government department, maybe through system-to-system integration. So it could be coming from many, many sources to your organization. And I would say when you start and dig into this, you are going to find the amount of indirect collection you have got is actually quite high. So what is changing and when? Now, it is an ever-moving feast at the moment in terms of what is changing. So the bill is still at a third reading stage. That's called the Privacy Amendment Bill. It has had about 2/3 of a reading so far, and it has been interrupted and on pause since then. Currently, the proposed commencement date in the bill is the 1st of May 2026. Okay, so we've got a bit of time, but actually, as I said, the amount of indirect collection you are doing could, for some organisations, chew through that time quite quickly. And in terms of what is changing, it says that if you receive information indirectly post the 1st of May, 2026, you need to give a privacy notice in effect to people whose information you've received. So not the person who provided it, but the person it's about, and tell them a series of items very similar to a privacy statement that you would give if you had collected it directly. Now, there are some exceptions to when you need to provide notice, and we'll be talking more about that next week. But if we think about it to begin with, we need to give something to these people to tell them what has happened. However, what is not changing in the Privacy Amendment Bill is one of our privacy principles, Principle 2, that says we should collect directly wherever possible. So when you work through your indirect collection and you come up with your list of where you're collecting, it's a really good point to go, I wonder if I actually conform with IPP2 anyway, before I worry about should I provide notice. Because if you've collected it outside of the Act, most probably the action you need to take is to stop collecting it rather than worry about how to give notice. Okay, so I expect you will find some examples where you shouldn't have been doing what you maybe have been for a while. Perfect. So let's work through some examples. So first up, let's talk about who's collecting from other organizations. So this might be, for example, a partner, a parent company, some other government entity, or some other groups. We're going to talk about some really common ones that we see in business. Perfect. So for those of you who are doing AML checks, so anti-money laundering checks, to prevent fraud, a lot of you use the confirmation service. So this is a DIA provided service, and it allows you to tell an organization with consent the person's name, date of birth, place of birth, and they come back and go, yep, that person appears to be on the birth register or the marriages register and doesn't appear to be dead at the moment. Or they come back and say, actually, we cannot confirm those details. So all you actually receive back is confirmed or not confirmed. Okay, you don't get anything more than that back. Okay, so the amount you are collecting is quite low, but it is equally quite significant in terms of being able to run through your business processes. Now, most of you won't necessarily recognize you're using the confirmation service. The reason for this is the confirmation service is rolled into a series of other services. So a lot of you will be going, yeah, that's not me, but I use Green ID or I use Centrex or Equifax to confirm their identity. Yeah, that's still the confirmation service behind the scenes. Okay? It's used by about 2,000 plus organisations in New Zealand. So the number of you most probably collecting indirectly that way, quite high. Okay, and I'll put a link in the chat at the end about who is on the current list for using that service. So quite a lot there. In good news for that one, most of these, as a requirement of using the confirmation service, should be a current customer, hopefully, or a potential customer. Okay, and you should have already been able to give them a privacy notice when they joined you, and actually the indirect collection will therefore be covered by it. What about some other things we do? So a lot of us do credit checks. Okay, we don't want to, particularly in the current times, extend lines of credit to people who can't pay. So whether this be a bank wanting to issue a mortgage, telco, electric company, for example, allowing you to open an account. A lot of us will say, yep, we want to do a credit check on this person. Okay, so the way the credit bureaus work, they have their own privacy code. And in effect, you have an access agreement with the credit bureau that you have signed up for. And it says you can disclose to them the person you want to do a credit check on, and they will disclose back to you, so not as your agent, but a disclosure both ways. They will disclose back to you a credit report on that individual for you to then make that decision, do I want to do this or not? Okay, so that credit bureau could be something like Centrix, Equifax, Experian, that used to be known as Ilion, etc. Okay, so really, really common one that people get. Interestingly, one to watch out for, because a bunch of organizations quite often do a credit check before they sign someone up to be a customer. So quite often, sometimes before they give them the privacy statement for themselves. So, other places we might be collecting from a government department. So there is a lot of intergovernment sharing that goes on between government departments. So, for example, when you are born and your birth is registered, the Department of Internal Affairs, through the Registrar General, will tell a whole bunch of organisations you are born, so they can add you to their records. Okay, so things like they will tell Ministry of Health, bit federal or now, so that you can be issued an NHI number. They will tell Inland Revenue, so you can get an IRD number, etc. So all of that sharing, the recipient of that sharing is receiving it indirectly. They're not getting it from the baby or the parent saying, hey, can you give them an NHI number? They're getting it from another government entity. Now, some of that sharing occurs due to legislation. Some of it is under memorandums of understanding. So government departments join forces and agreed. Some is under very old matching agreements under the Privacy Act, and more modern, some is under ACEs. Now, with the exception of the ACER, IPP3A still applies to that sharing. The ACEs are slightly different, and the reason for that is part of the ledge change is that all ACEs that exist at the time the change goes into effect will have IPP3A varied under that ACER, so they will not need to provide notice of that indirect collection. Okay. However, if you are partway through creating an ACER or are going to start a new one, you will need to vary that principle as well as the other ones you need to vary as part of this. Now, that said, most of this cross-government sharing is not happening due to ACEs. Most of it is happening due to legislation or information matching agreements or MOUs. So we need to think, if we're a government entity, where are all the places that we are receiving information from? And that's most probably, for some of you, quite a big map of where it is being received. Equally, there will be people like law enforcement agencies who will be getting a lot of indirect information. So if I want to report, I want to ring up Doc and say, hey, somebody is doing something to a seal on the beach, that will be an indirect collection. It's about the person who's doing something to the seal. It's not about me. I'm just the person reporting it. Now, under legislation, they might go, oh, actually, that's not us. We need to transfer this request over to MPI, and MPI would then have received it indirectly as well. Okay, so you can see how it's going to make a really complicated web, particularly within government, of how all that information flows together. So other things that we get for more private sector companies, we get a lot of indirect collection through referrals. So these are really common. Want to build my brand, want to get more customers. So maybe I have paid a company to do lead generation for me. Okay, they're not doing it as my agent because they're generating leads for tons of other people. And they are literally selling their customer book of, these people are really interested in gardening. Wouldn't it be great if you contact them? So if they're selling you that list or a customer base to do to build into yours, and you're then going to reach out to those people, or even if you're not going to reach out to them, they've given it to you, you have now got it indirectly. Now, you would find it really hard to argue it's not personal information, because at the end of the day, you're receiving it so you can reach out to a person. So very definitely personal there. Other things we might get, appointment requests. So that might be, for example, my GP has decided that actually I need to go and see, I know, specialist orthotics company to get a brace. They send a referral through that orthotics company who now have my information, and they're going to reach out to me and book an appointment, I hope. Really do hope they're going to do that, but if not, then they've still got it, right? Another really common one we get is attendees. So you go and you go to a conference, you have a trade stand. And as part of paying your exorbitant fee to get a trade stand at this conference, you get a list of everyone who has attended the conference so that you can write to them and send them an email about your services, for example. That receipt of that attendee list is an indirect collection. The people didn't give it to you, the individuals didn't give it to you themselves. You've received it from the conference organizer. Okay. So that next step then, under the new changes, would be then to determine, do I need to contact them and give them notice? Or is it covered by one of the exemptions? Okay. That's why for some of these bigger conferences you go to through professional conference organizations at the moment, you quite often afterwards get in those emails, hey, we've added your details to this list, or hey, just to let you know, we've received your details, here's our privacy statement. Okay, that's why that's happening. And that's what it's saying. The changes for indirect collection are not something new for they're new for New Zealand, but they're not new worldwide, right? GDPR for Europe has had indirect collection requirements, notice requirements since it began. Okay, so a lot of people are very used to giving this indirect collection notice. In New Zealand, it will be quite a change for us in terms of how we do this. Other ones we have that come up quite often, brokers. So in terms of brokers, sometimes they will broker just for you, and they will in effect be your agent. So they only sell your goods and services, nobody else's, and they are in effect an extension of yourself. Okay, not there for indirect collection. However, if it's something like a mortgage broker who is selling many people's mortgages, there is some chance that they will not be acting as your agent under the Privacy Act, and therefore are actually disclosing the information to you, resulting in you having an indirect collection about who has applied for a mortgage with you, for example. Okay. Oh, so those are some of the places we might get things from organizations. As I say, every organization is different. So you're going to have to go through and have a look at where you are receiving information from other organizations. Common places that you will see it, though, are both in onboarding, so getting new customers from somewhere, or commencing services with your organization. The other place we commonly see it is HR. So if we think about what do we get from other organizations in the HR space, we've maybe got a police check from about you, or we have maybe checked your qualifications and we've heard back from a professional body about you. Okay. So those give us some examples of where we're going to get it from another organization. They're usually the easier ones to spot, by the way. Now, the more challenging ones, where are we getting stuff from other individuals? Now, depending on your business model, this might be a problem for you, may not be. Okay, but some common examples we have. I open an electric account in my name. But oh God, I'm really bad at life admin, and I'd like someone else to be authorized on my account. Okay, so I give them the name and phone number and maybe the email address of the person I want to have authorized. Right? That's not about me. That's all about somebody else. They may be aware I've added them as an authorized person on my account, hopefully, but they may not. So they may be completely oblivious that there is some electric company out there with their contact details. Okay. Um, Another common one, if we're dealing with claims about each other, right? So I crash my car into somebody else, unfortunately, and I need to talk to my insurance company about it. So I ring up my insurance company because I want to make a claim. I'm sure it's not my fault, but I want to make a claim. So I ring them up and I explain to them all about the lady who pulled out in her car, and this is her name, and this is her license plate, and this is how she was driving, and this is how it's surely not my fault. Right? All that information I have provided about the lady is her personal information, not mine. So therefore, for that individual, we need to consider, do we need to give them notice? Because it's all collected indirectly about them. Okay. Um, Equally, I talked briefly about recruitment. Okay, when you apply for a job, usually some other people input into this. Okay, so they might be your references, for example. So they will be someone whose name, email address, current employer maybe that you've told them about. That you have said, please go forth if I'm successful for this job and contact these people. Okay. Now, the amount of personal information we have about them might be quite minimal to start with, but it could expand if we check those references, tell us something about them. But usually when we're then collecting the reference, we're collecting it directly from them if they're telling us something about themselves. Other common ones we have, if we ask for documents, so I know, want to purchase a house. I'm going to have a sale and purchase agreement. I've got personal information about the person selling the house, right? So I've got their name, what house they currently live in, potentially a builder's report about the state of their current house. I might also have some details about why they're selling it that I have shared with you as part of maybe applying for a mortgage. All of that will be contained in documents that I've provided when I wanted to get a service from you. Okay. Equally, if I go off sick, I'm going to provide personal information about the GP who saw me, what day they were working because they saw me on that day, etc. So the amount of information that will be contained in documents will be quite high. Now, before we all worry, there are exceptions that we're going to talk about next week about when we do and don't have to provide notice. And one of those is about the level of information and about the practicalities of given notice. So before we worry too much, just do know that exists. Other common one we see, photographs. Share with me a picture of yourself, I know, in one of our local parks. Part of a competition. Show me enjoying the summer in the Wellington region. Okay. I'm in the photo, great. There's 3 other people in the photo in the background. They're all clearly identifiable. We don't know their name, but they're all there. Okay, great. Now we've got their personal information. Maybe it's not a problem, but maybe we want to publish these photos on our Facebook page. They're most probably not going to take kindly. The impacts on them are quite large if we haven't told them this is happening for it. Okay, so it's just some examples of where we might be collecting indirectly. And as I say, these ones are a lot harder to spot about individuals. That said, they are also the ones usually where you are collecting about one individual at a time rather than bulk about every one of your customers or everyone of your customer base all in one go. So they are sometimes the less risky of the two. So how are we going to identify all of these? So first and foremost, PIAs are really useful in terms of being able to identify this indirect collection. So some of you preparing for this change have added to your privacy impact assessments and asked questions for a while now about who is providing this personal information. You were historically quite often asking this question because you wanted to make sure that the indirect collection was in accordance with IPP2 and that you could actually do the indirect collection. So therefore, in your PIA documents, a large number of you will have details about, as part of this business process, we collect stuff from this other organisation. So you could go through those PIAs that you've got and identify those with indirect collection. You could absolutely do that. Some of you will have nice tools that allow you to very quickly analyze your previous PIAs and pull out who checked yes to indirect collection. Others of you, they'll be in Word documents. So you might need to make a risk-based decision about which of the PIAs you're going to go back through. Which of them are more likely to have indirect collection in that's of significant concern. You might also, in your organisation, have data maps. So you might have data flows about this as part of our onboarding process. We get information from here, here, and here. Oh, okay. Well, none of those are the person. Those are all indirect collection. Okay. It's really unusual to have a full data map of your entire organisation, but they can be a pointer to be able to work out where this indirect collection is coming from. Other things to think about is some of this indirect collection you'll be paying for, okay? Most organisations other than government aren't generally sharing it with you for free. So maybe we could go through and go, right, who are we actually paying for data? Because likely as that might well be an indirect collection. So we could go through our finance system and work that out. And that will pick up things like that confirmation service, credit bureau, all those people. It's not a free service. Okay. You might also then take an approach to go, I will sit with the particular business units who we think are going to be higher risk. Okay, so that's those onboarding ones, maybe our contact center, etc., who are going to be getting this information in. We're seeing a lot of our indirect collection that's not at that onboarding stage comes about often as part of exception processes. So make sure you do check those out. So for example, why did you not pay your bill for our services this month? Well, you know, my mother was sick, they're in hospital, my father got this as well, they've got this medical condition, I'm really sorry I can't pay my bill. Okay, great, but now we've got all of that personal information we most probably didn't need. Really, we just wanted you to pay your bill for it. Okay, so what are we going to do about this? So the next thing for us to do is to go through and work out all the points of our indirect collection. Now, you are not going to find them all. So we need to take a risk-based decision about how we go about finding them all, finding the ones we want to do. As I said earlier, you will be really surprised about how many you have. So there'll be lots of you, I expect, here who went, yep, not a problem for us. I've got like 2 things we indirectly collect on. That's it. You'll be really surprised how many of them there are. For a standard organization, it is actually really high. So it is a significant change to your business to be able to go through and work this out. As I said earlier, I would suggest you focus on the organizational sharing first, mainly because it's usually part of the standard process, and you'll do it for every single one of your individuals. Therefore, there is likely a greater volume of individuals impacted, and quite often the more sensitive data might be coming that way. So from there, what we suggest is you create a register of all your indirect collection points. And this is kind of going to be the basis of your project to uplift. Because what we're then going to suggest is that you then go through that register and go, right, of these people, which of this indirect collection should we not be doing? Because actually it doesn't conform to IPP2. Therefore, the best solution to this is to make a business process change and stop collecting it. Cool. Tick. Business process change done. Indirect collection problem gone away. Or we might then use that to go, yep, we need to indirectly collect. So where do we need to give notice? And that's where we then step into next week and we talk about, right, have they already had notice? Is it so inconsequential we don't need to give notice? Someone else told them we've got it, etc. And we can then step through those different collection points and make a plan for each and every one of them and mark it off your project plan. As I said, it comes into effect May next year, hopefully. Due to the delays in third reading, it may push out some. That said, this is all good work to be done anyway, to prepare, but also because you will find that a number of your indirect collections should not be. And you should stop doing them. And that's in accordance with the current Privacy Act. That means you shouldn't have been doing them for quite a long time before. Okay. Perfect. So that's all I have to cover. Next week, we're going to talk about how do we give that notice. I'm going to pass over to you guys to see what you have questions-wise. So if you want to put your questions into the Q&A, we'll see if we can answer some of those together.